The police dragged a black woman out of her car for looking suspicious, then panicked when they saw the FBI badge on her dashboard. They pulled her out like she was trash. One officer even muttered another one of those before slamming her face first onto the hood of her own car. The street was quiet, except for the sound of heavy boots and the too familiar crackle of the police radio. Her name was Amani Rhodes, and she had just stopped at a red light near her apartment in Arlington when the flashing lights appeared behind her. Nothing unusual, she'd been stopped before 4 random checks. The difference this time? They didn't ask questions. They yanked her door open without a word. "Hands where I can see 'em." "Step out of the vehicle," barked the younger cop, who barely looked 21. "What's this about?" Amani asked calmly, both hands visible on the steering wheel. Her voice was low, steady, unshaken. "Step out now." Before she could speak again, the door was ripped open and 2 pairs of hands dragged her out. No warning. No explanation. No Miranda rights. Just the stinging scrape of asphalt against her knees and the sharp pop of cold metal cuffs on her wrists. She didn't scream. She didn't resist. She'd learned a long time ago what resistance could cost someone who looked like her. But then it happened. The older officer, mid-50s, with a paunch belly and worn uniform, leaned into the car to search. His flashlight scanned the dashboard and stopped. There, lying neatly on the leather mat just above the gearshift, was a leather badge case, flipped open. Inside, gleaming under the beam of his light, was an FBI badge. He froze. "Shit," he muttered under his breath. "What is it?" the younger one asked, still tightening the cuffs on Amani's wrists. The older cop's voice was different now. Hesitant. Shaky. She's bureau." Silence. The young officer's hands stalled. Amani turned her head slowly, her braids brushing against the cruiser's side mirror. "Yes," she said, her voice cool and razor-sharp. "I'm Special Agent Amani Rhodes. And you just committed assault on a federal officer." Panic rippled through both officers like a shot of cold water. The younger one stumbled back, face pale. "2 didn't know." "You didn't ask," Amani snapped, rising to her feet even as the cuffs stayed tight around her wrists. "Because to you, I looked like someone who didn't belong." Her words weren't loud. But they echoed. The older cop reached for his radio. "We have a situation." "No," Amani said, cutting him off. "You already had one. Now you have a report." She turned toward the crowd gathering on the sidewalk. Phones were out. A few were filming. Some whispered. A woman across the street shouted, "We saw everything." Amani faced them, blood trickling from her wrist where the cuff bit too tight. Her eyes were steel. That night, Arlington Police Department released a statement, "We regret the incident and are cooperating fully with federal authorities." But regret is not the same as accountability. The next morning, Amani sat in her modest home, black coffee in hand, staring at a folder thick with documents. This wasn't the first time. Not even close. Born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, Amani knew what it meant to be watched, followed, doubted. Her parents had taught her to speak politely to officers, keep her hands visible, never wear her hoodie up in a store. She learned to love the Constitution like scripture. Studied law enforcement not because she idolized it, but because she wanted to fix it. She graduated top of her class at Quantico. Her psychological profile marked her as composed under pressure and brilliantly analytical. And still, with a federal badge and a Glock on her hip, she couldn't drive home without being dragged out like a suspect. But now she had more than words. She had a case. She filed her report to Internal Affairs, but she didn't stop there. She launched an investigation, personal, unsanctioned at first, into traffic stops across Arlington over the last 2 years. With contacts inside the Bureau and the DOJ, she compiled a spreadsheet. Names, races, ages. Reasons given for stops. Outcomes. The patterns weren't just clear. They were damning. Black drivers were 5 times more likely to be stopped. 3 times more likely to be searched. Officers rarely reported any fines. And the same 2 names came up over and over again, Officer Grant and Officer Myers. Her attackers. But what Amani didn't know was that her quiet digging was already making waves. At the precinct, someone was leaking her movements. Her old bureau supervisor called. "You're poking at something bigger than you think," he warned. "Be careful." "I didn't survive all this just to back down," Amani replied. The deeper she went, the more she found. False reports. Body cam footage that mysteriously malfunctioned. And one incident where a teenage boy was tasered for non-compliance after asking why he was pulled over. Amani tracked down the boy's mother. They met at a small diner outside the city. "He still has nightmares," the woman said, eyes puffy. "They said he reached for something, but it was his phone. He was calling me." Amani leaned in. "Do you want to tell your story in court?" The woman's voice cracked. "Will it matter?" Amani looked at her, firm. "It will if I'm standing next to you." The case began building faster than she could have imagined. A quiet storm of statements, affidavits, and suppressed evidence. When she finally filed her civil rights lawsuit, it wasn't just for herself. It was on behalf of over 30 victims. Arlington PD was forced to respond. The city was thrust into the national spotlight. News outlets picked up the story. Some anchors spun it, asking if procedures had been misunderstood. Others showed the arrest footage, letting it speak for itself. But not everyone supported Amani. Some accused her of playing the race card. Threats came in. Anonymous messages. "Stay in your lane. You're not FBI material." One note was taped to her car, "We know where you live." Still, she walked into court every day in her black suit, badge clipped at her waist. Her presence was quiet power. In the courtroom, the defense tried every tactic. She matched the description of a suspect. The officers feared for their safety. She didn't comply fast enough. But Amani had prepared for all of it. Her team included a forensic video analyst who slowed down the footage frame by frame, showing she had her hands up before they ever touched her. They called civil rights historians, racial bias experts, even former officers who left the force due to internal corruption. The jury was mixed racially, politically. But one thing they all agreed on, the footage was clear. So was the pattern. But the real shift came when Amani testified. She described the night of the arrest. The sting of asphalt. The click of the cuffs. But then, she spoke of her parents, of growing up being told that even if she did everything right, she could still be treated like a suspect. "I didn't become an FBI agent because I thought the system was perfect," she said. "I became one because I believed it could be better." Her voice didn't tremble. She ended with a question. "How many badges do we need to carry before our lives are respected?" The courtroom fell silent. The courtroom was packed the morning Amani's motion to compel records was set for hearing. She arrived early, sipping coffee in the empty hallway, reviewing her notes. In the gallery sat her team, the boy's mother, the forensic analyst, several plaintiffs who had shared their stories. They shifted in their seats, nervous but resolved. Halfway through the presentation, Arlington's city attorney attempted to object, arguing procedural technicalities. Amani paused, looked directly at the judge, and with steady clarity explained why every technicality mattered when human lives were on the line. Outside, the police union bristled. Officers Grant and Myers had been placed on administrative leave, but murmurings in precinct offices said it wouldn't last. There were rumors, retraining, reassignment, possibly a return. Amani didn't flinch. She kept filing motions, gathering affidavits, pushing for transparency. Every step of the way, nearly everyone underestimated her. One night, a man showed up at her door. He slipped an envelope into her mailbox. No name. Inside were dozens of pages, payroll logs, internal emails, text messages coordinating retaliatory stops. It wasn't from the Bureau or DOJ. It was a whistleblower from inside the department. And it carried the stink of fear. She copied the documents and brought them to her civil rights team. She drafted a new brief, titled Pattern and Practice Evidence under 42 U.S.C. Section 14141. The language was legal precision, racial profiling, statistical disparities, retaliation. The documents were incendiary. She knew filing them would escalate everything. But she filed. Within hours, news broke again, leaked police files revealing a pattern of targeted stops. Civil rights groups rallied. Local news anchor teased, federal lawsuit now includes internal Arlington PD documents. System shattered from within. Grant and Myers filed defamation suits. They demanded public apologies. Arlington's mayor delivered a press conference, calling for calm and confirming a federal investigation. He offered reforms: a pilot body-worn camera program, community oversight board, annual bias training. Some saw it as progress. Others as damage control. Mariska Duval, Amani's DOJ liaison from D.C., called her late that evening. "You've accelerated every process," she said. "You'll have more investigation than any precinct in this state has ever seen." Amani replied, quietly, that was the point. Weeks later, during a preliminary trial phase, Amani stood outside courtroom 10 with the teenage boy who'd been tasered. His mother held his hand. His injuries still fresh in his memory. But that morning, he wore a clean dress shirt, sat at the witness stand, and said, "I was only calling for my mom. Then they tackled me. I thought they would kill me." That single statement, without theatrics, echoed through the room. Jurors shifted. Observers leaned forward. Reporters scribbled notes. When cross-examination came, the officers hesitated. Their carefully crafted narratives unraveled. Dashcam still showed the young man's hands empty, there was no weapon. Amani concluded, fear cannot be assumed because of color. By the third day of live testimony, dozens watched from overflow seating. Community advocates, union reps, journalists. Many had been silent until the moment someone dragged the daughter of this city out of her car. Now they had a voice. One evening, back home, Amani found an envelope on her desk. From the judge who presided over the motion hearing, Judge Harper. She opened it. Inside, a note. "Your composure today reminded me why I became a judge. For people who believe in fairness more than fear." Amani folded it carefully. That small gesture felt significant, an acknowledgement not public, but political. As discovery continued, Arlington PD responded. They released internal memos detailing revised stop protocols. New maps of patrol zones. A log of civilian complaints. They even posted policy changes on their website. It looked like accountability. But many knew change was only as strong as enforcement. Amani's team subpoenaed email chains between high-ranking officials and PR consultants planning damage containment. They revealed an orchestrated media response. Even a social media campaign to discredit her. One internal email said, her speech was too polished. We need her to be the story, not the symbol. When such details hit public record, outrage was inevitable. At a city council meeting, played live on local TV, speakers lined up, civil rights lawyers, pastors, ex-officers turned reform advocates. Prosecutors' office leaders asked for funding. Community groups demanded independent oversight. Amani watched from the back, hands folded. She did not address the council. She didn't have to. Finally, in open court, the case moved to closing arguments. Amani stood before the jury. She spoke softly, deliberately. The badge I have is not what saves me. The law is only as just as those who trust it to be fair. The men who stopped me treated me like any other black driver they deemed suspicious. But what they didn't know, what they never saw, was that I carried another badge upstairs. She tapped her suit lapel. That I worked to make the system fair for everyone. That even while cleaning this courthouse, I studied it. I knew its strengths, and I saw its blind spots. A jury member raised his head, others whispered. She paused. We are not asking for special treatment. We are asking for recognition, for change. When the jury filed out, the gallery erupted into hushed conversations. She returned to her seat, eyes steady. A week later, the verdict came down. Jury finds Arlington PD liable for civil rights violations. Plaintiff awarded compensatory and punitive damages. Court orders federal monitor appointed to oversee department reforms. Internal Affairs Unit to be transferred under Civilian Oversight Board. Officers Grant and Myers barred from active duty. It was a landmark victory. Not only in the courtroom, but across the state. City leaders held another press conference. The youngest city council member said, "If Arlington is to be safe for all residents, we cannot ignore what we see. We owe it to them to fix it." Some critics called it theatrics. Others saw hope. Amani returned to the courthouse a few days later to clean. Her legal license in her binder on her desk, but today she had a mop in hand. She paused at the same spot where she'd been dragged out of her car. She knelt and wiped the floor. A few interns walked by and nodded. No snickers. No gasps. A man approached. A janitor she recognized, older, gray-haired. He said, "I walked past you every day. I didn't know." Amani looked up and said softly, "Now you do." He smiled. "Thank you." That evening she stood outside the building, badge clipped to her waist, mop by her side. Reporter from the Washington Post approached her. "What's next for you?" She thought of the boy she represented. Of the whistleblower who risked everything. Of quiet janitors unseen. She said, "I keep working. So those who come after me don't have to start from scratch." She paused. They shouldn't have to carry a badge to be treated with dignity. She walked into the building. 6 months later, Arlington PD officially accepted oversight recommendations. A new Office of Community Review was established. Federal grants came rolling in. Officers underwent implicit bias training. Body cameras standard. Recruitment expanded, young people of color entered the force. City Hall held a ceremony naming a street corner after Amani Rhodes' way, not for the lawsuit, but for leading change. When the ribbon was cut, she gave a short speech. No mops. No props. Just a badge, her parents in the front row, and allies beside her. "I do not represent the FBI today," she said. "I represent every voice that spoke truth when someone handed them a pen, not a podium. Even when they thought I would mop, not plead." Tears fell. Applause echoed. Photographers snapped pictures of her parents' wiping faces, city council members holding her hands. But the work wasn't over. Amani resumed her legal career, taking on civil rights cases nationwide. She never forgot Arlington. She visited often. She cleaned at least once a week. She taught at local law clinics. She mentored girls who said they wanted to become agents, lawyers, or simply be heard. She carried a framed copy of her very first court order typed while she cleaned as a reminder of why she started. Decades later, she retired. Her lawsuit, the monitoring office, policy changes they had shifted the region's legal culture. Her retirement party was held in a courthouse foyer refurbished in part from grant funds she helped secure. Speakers spoke of her legacy. When asked what she valued most, she said, "The day someone looked at me and recognized not just my badge, but my story." She left the courthouse lobby quietly, the way she'd always done. Mop retired but stored nearby in the Cornera symbol, not a burden. Years later, children visiting her exhibit at the National Civil Rights Museum would stand before her uniform, her broom, her court order framed together. The plaque below read, Special Agent and Civil Rights Attorney Amani Rhodes, when justice ignored her, she swept the court but not before writing the order that changed it. And in that final display, people understood. Justice is louder than fear. Truth stronger than silence. Dignity cannot be assumed, it must be earned, even through places we clean.